Okay, and we are live. I'm Charles Peralo with Akil Alleyne, and we are here with Dr. Professor Walter Block, who's an economist from Loyola, New Orleans. Walter Block has been an economist for now, I believe, 40 years, correct?
Oh, more like 50, give or
And
take.
and I believe you've had 500 publications at this point.
Almost. I'm nearing 500.
Nearing 500, and I prefer all of them over anything Paul Krugman has ever produced.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
Uh,
Yeah,
so So
Thank you.
we had some fun questions. We had some things, but I think there is an elephant in the room, and in this case, literally an elephant in the room. Donald Trump. You've said you are a supporter of the Donald. Just to show my views on that, I could put up a photo of me when he announced he was running for president at his event, where I was photographed taking a heart attack from the balcony. So, what about the Donald do you like?
Well, first of all, my support of the Donald is mainly or only as a Republican nominee for president. I'm not
Okay.
comparing him to Libertarians. I'm not comparing him to Democrats. Just who do I want as a Libertarian to be the Republican candidate? And I favor the Donald. Why? Because I think he is least likely to get us into World War III. I think the other people are more likely to get us into World War III, and I oppose World War III. I don't
It's
want.
always good to oppose World War III. So
Sorry.
it's always good to oppose World War III.
Yes, we're agreed on that. And the Donald has said various things that no one else has said that leads me to believe that he's less likely to do this. By the way, I supported Barack Obama in '08 against McCain, and I supported Barack Obama against Mitt Romney in 2012 for the same reason. I thought McCain was going to drop an atom bomb on somebody, and Mitt Romney is picking a fight with China, of all places. And not that I like Barack Obama. I don't think he's a great guy. He's not a libertarian, but he seemed a little less likely to put his finger on that red button and let off some missiles. Now, he's not great, but he's better than McCain. I mean, this is sort of giving a compliment that's not really a high compliment, but it's a compliment.
Now,
And it's
did
the
you
same
actually?
thing that I support Donald. Donald is the only one out of all those out of all those Republican neocons, with the exception of Rand Paul, and certainly of Ron Paul, to say we should get out of NATO. Now, NATO is a pain in the neck. NATO is sort of encircling Russia, and I don't see why we need Russia. I don't see why we not need Russia, but why we need NATO. He's the only one. I mean, if you mention the word Putin to these other guys, they start frothing at the mouth. Donald says, I like Putin. Putin likes me. That's evidence that he's less likely to lead us into a war. What was that fat guy, Chris Christie?
Chris Christie, Christie
He was
Cream.
asked, we have a no-fly zone in Syria, and yet the Russians are violating. What should we do? He said, shoot them out of the air. And Rand Paul, bless him, said, if you want World War III, vote for this guy. Well, Chris Christie is no longer in there, although he might come back under certain scenarios, who knows. But all the other people, the other neocons, all want to have a war with Russia, for God's sakes. And then Donald said things like, look, we got rid of Gaddafi in Libya, we got rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and now, are things better? No, we have ISIL. And now we want to go and fix up Syria. And Donald said, not on my watch. Now, it's true he contradicted himself. Sometimes he didn't seem to be 100% behind these things. But he's the only one that said anything like that. Whereas all these other guys are trying to outdo, I'm tougher than you, I'm macho or more macho than you, I'm going to kick butt elsewhere. And then Donald said, "What are all those troops doing in Korea, South Korea, in Japan, in Germany? They have trains that can go 200 miles an hour, and we don't. And we're supporting them. Let them pay for it, or let's pull our troops back." Now, this is almost Ron Paulian. This is magnificent. So when I say I support him, it's not just that he's the least bad. He's pretty good. I give him a B or a B plus or maybe a B minus because he's a little weak on other things from a libertarian point of view. But on war, which is crucially important, he's head and shoulders over those guys. So I challenge any libertarian to say me nay, to say why I'm wrong.
Well, we might give you that challenge, but I mean, just to start off with some things I don't think you probably have disagreements with Donald Trump on. he said that he wants a 30% tariff with China and Mexico. That's definitely not you.
Come on, give me a break.
That's called I mean, that's called Smoot-Hawley 2.0. And let's see, immigration. He's been a pretty big guy on that.
I'm an open borders kind of guy,
Same
and
here.
I don't want to build any walls. And although I like his stuff on political correctness, he's magnificent on political.
I will give him that compliment.
Yeah.
Akil, do you want to jump in on thoughts there?
I mean, I suppose what I question is whether Donald Trump, even though he may be less hawkish, at least in terms of his rhetoric, than a number of the other Republican candidates, do you really think that on the whole he actually has a liberty ethic that would enable him to govern in a way that would leave Americans freer at the end of his presidency than they are at the beginning? Because that's one of the many areas where I have a lot of doubts about him.
Well, I agree with you, and I would probably say probably not. I mean, his middle name is not freedom. But it's a comparative thing. Now, look, I gave this example of slavery, and I said we're all slaves, and the master is willing to allow us to vote between overseer goody and overseer baddie. Overseer goody is going to beat the crap out of us once a month, and overseer baddie is going to beat the crap out of us once a day. Who do we vote for? Well, we vote for overseer goody. We don't like having the crap beat out of us, but if we got to have the crap beat out of us, and it seems that we do, let's do it once a month rather than once a day. It doesn't mean that overseer goody is a good guy, that he's pro-freedom. It doesn't mean that we favor slavery. It just means we're trying to pick the least bad. And it's not just the least bad, because he has said some good things. So now compare him with Cruz. Cruz is a maniac. Kasich is a maniac. Hillary is a maniac. They want to pick wars with Mars, for all I know. If there were Martians, they'd probably want to attack Mars.
Well, when it comes to Ted Cruz, it's always interesting because if you look at his 2012 Senate campaign, where I was a fairly strong supporter of him, on his website, under foreign policy, he said, I was an opponent of the Iraq War and want to end the Afghanistan War. So it's more just, what the hell happened? I mean, so do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think if he stuck to that rhetoric, you would have been a much fonder supporter of him, or?
Yes, I agree. Look, George Bush, the most recent Bush, ran on a peace platform, and look what he did.
Well, not the younger brother, but
not the young, not Jeb, George.
Not the able to George's cane, but
look. You know, there's a sense in which you can't trust these guys. You know, what's the expression? How do you know when a politician is lying? Except for Ron Paul, when he's moving his lips. But you know, you have to take something of what they say, and only Donald is saying, let's get out of NATO. Let's get out of NATO. I mean, the neocons are going berserk. Get out of NATO.
I think that's a mess. I mean, do you think the Republicans are actually at all, like the Republicans voted for Trump, do you think the foreign policy thing they're actually genuine with at all, or do you think it's just they like the message, they like the feeling of the campaign, or do you think there is some greater thing in the Republican movement where they don't like the neocons anymore?
Well, you know, Taft was a Republican senator, and he ran for president. He didn't make it, but he was pretty good. And Donald is sort of channeling Donald Trump.
Robert Taft.
Robert Taft. And Robert Taft was, you know, pretty good. Not perfect. He wasn't a Murray Rothbard. He wasn't a Ron Paul. Speaking of Ron Paul has been bitterly attacking Donald Trump. And pretty much everything Ron says about Donald Trump, I agree with. Namely, Donald is no good on this, Donald is no good on that, Donald is socialist, Donald is, you know, protectionist, all that. But Ron never says, well, and therefore Trump is worse than Cruz, or Trump is worse than Kasich, or he's worse than anyone else. He never says that. So I just sent Ron an email saying, look, Ron, I agree with virtually everything you say negative about Trump, but you never compare him with other candidates. Now, please compare him with other candidates. And I sent them my stuff on Libertarians for Trump, where we make the case, Donald Miller and Ralph Rako and I make the case that, yes, Donald Trump is no libertarian, but he's pretty good on foreign policy, And foreign policy is more important than economics or personal liberties, because foreign policy determines economics and personal liberties. And in any case, you know, if you discriminate against somebody, it doesn't kill him. Whereas if you drop a nuclear bomb on him, it ruins his whole day. So, you know, foreign policy is very important. So I'm deliriously anxious to hear from Ron Paul, who has been a bitter critic of Donald, and ask him if he'd look at it not objectively, or not just Donald, compare him with libertarianism, but compare Donald with Cruz or Kasich or Jeb Bush or Rubio or Chris Christie or any
Everybody
of them.
but Rand Paul.
Well, anybody. Look, Rand Paul is way better. When Rand Paul was in the race, I wasn't for Trump. I was for Rand Paul. And then people, libertarians, would say, well, how can you support Rand Paul? Because, you know, Rand Paul, there's no Ron Paul. And Rand Paul is, you know, he just wants to investigate the Fed. He doesn't want to get rid of, you know, things like that. And I would say, yes, Rand Paul is not a perfect libertarian. He's no Ron Paul. He's no Murray Rothbard. But by gum and by golly, he's head and shoulders over everyone else, including Donald. But Rand is no longer in the election. So Donald is, and now Donald is way better than the other guys.
Now, why do you think the Rand Paul campaign failed? I mean, because as someone who was there from day one, I donated to the campaign, I volunteered. I saw a very poor performance in Iowa, and it was basic. And he had more boots on the ground than Ron Paul did in 2012, where Ron Paul did 6 times better than he did.
Well, Ron Paul, I have to show you a book.
I have a copy, I believe. I think
Which
I know
one?
you're going to show.
Which one?
I think I know what you're going to show. Show it first, and yeah, I believe I have a copy of that book.
Okay, this book is my love letter to Ron Paul. This is, I mean, I just can't say how much I revere and love this man. He is magnificent. He is, you know, the leader of our movement with the passing of Murray Rothbard. And you asked me, well, why did Rand fail? Well, Rand failed because it wasn't Ron. He what is it?
He
The
sort of moderated himself.
I'm sorry. He moderated the oak thing fell too far away from the oak tree. The acorn fell too far away. He was trying to be nice to the neocons. Whereas Ron wasn't nice to the neocon. I mean, he was polite, he was a gentleman, but he didn't try to make common cause with them in any way. So Rand Paul alienated the Ron Paul boots on the ground, the masses of people that would have been delirious about Rand Paul if Rand had channeled Ron. But he didn't.
Ron Paul ran for president in the past, and his campaign didn't really go very far either. So based on Ron Paul's past electoral performances, how can you really say that the reason Rand failed is because he wasn't similar enough to his father?
Well, if you remember, when 2016 race started, there were about 17 people, candidates.
17 exactly.
It was there 17. In 2012, I think there were 12. 2012, there were 12 people. Guess who were the last 2 standing?
Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney and Ron Paul.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Forgot about that. Well, Rick Santorum came in second. That's why I said that.
The last 2 standing were Ron Paul and Mitt Romney. Now, look, the country is not libertarian. This is not a libertarian country. This is either a Republican or a Republican country. So I say Ron did magnificently to come in second out of 12. He almost made it. He didn't quite make it, but he did pretty well given, you know, it's sort of like if you were to have a race against Usain Bolt and you came within 1 second of him, I'd say you did pretty well because, you know, his time for the 100.
In what sense, if I may just follow up, in what sense did Ron Paul come in second? I'm aware that he stayed in the race and, you know, didn't throw in the towel until, I guess he was the last candidate, other than Romney, obviously, to throw in the towel in 2012. But in terms of his actual delegate count, the number of delegates he actually won, how he performed in the popular vote, state by state, in the primaries and caucuses, did he really come second to Mitt Romney in terms of the actual electoral results?
No, obviously you're correct. He didn't come in second in that sense, but he did come in second in my sense, which is not an unimportant sense, although I would admit your sense is better than mine in some sense, because if you counted all the votes or all the delegates that these guys got, Ron might have been 9th out of 12, or 6th out of 12, or something
Well, actually,
like
he
that. He
was
wasn't.
third.
Was he third?
At third place. I mean, no, that's because he stayed in for the longest time.
Okay, well, if you abstract from that, he didn't do well. But the point is, it's sort of like if a I don't know, if a guy on crutches comes in second to Usain Bolt, he's doing pretty well. The point is,
I always say, please.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I always say this regarding Ron Paul's 2012 campaign. We had a 77-year-old congressman run for Texas, who's only a congressman, not elected to statewide office, and he raised $45 million, which put him second to Romney. Came in second place in New Hampshire, third in Iowa, second in Nevada. That's pretty good.
Yeah, there was one place where he came in second. I think it was Iowa, and they mentioned the first, third, and fourth guy, and they never mentioned him.
Oh,
and
that's Fox. Oh,
you
can't trust Bill.
And then look at how they treated him in South Carolina when he said we should, adhere to the what is that? Not the gold standard. Treat other people the way that we would want them to treat you. The golden rule. And he got booed for that. I mean, the Republicans hated him. So I say Ron did magnificently. He was never going to win. He probably would have got assassinated if he got the what do you call it, the nod. And I'm happy he didn't get he was never going to win. More people of libertarianism than anyone else. Ayn Rand and Ron Paul. Well, that's a success. I mean, I give lectures all around the country, and sometimes I'll ask, why are you here in this audience? And it's always a favorable audience. Usually unfavorable people don't invite me. And most people, when I did this 20, 30 years ago, would say Ayn Rand, and now most people say Ron Paul. So Ron Paul was a great success. If Rand Paul ran a Ron Paulian candidacy, I think he'd still be in the mix. I just like Ron was in the mix. And I don't know, he would have promoted liberty a lot better than he did. So I greatly regret from a libertarian point of view that Rand, the acorn of Rand fell too far away from the oak tree of Ron, namely Rand wasn't... he tried to compromise too much, and therefore he lost the libertarian enthusiasm, and he never picked up anyone from the neocon. They didn't trust him because he was Ron Paul's son or whatever. So that's why he lost, and I hope and pray that he'll do well as in his re-election campaign for Senator of Kentucky.
Well, his re-election campaign, they have him up 30 points, so I think he's safe there.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Well, I mean, I don't want to sound offensive saying this, but the Democrat who's running against him, I don't think Kentucky's going to elect an openly gay man with ties to the KKK. But I look at this, when I always look at the Rand campaign, I just see sort of the best example of his failure being the Planned Parenthood, which, he put a lot of time into that. It was an issue that the Republicans did care about. I personally didn't see why it was that big of a deal just on a fiscal front, but he spent 2 months of the campaign with that as his centerpiece issue, and he didn't seem, and his poll numbers went in half during that period, and it seemed like all the Planned Parenthood credit went to Ted Cruz. So it seems like, he gave the neocons and the social conservatives some red meat, and they never bought. So, I mean, would you give any other, so if you were to advise any campaign going further, because in 2020, I hope a Libertarian Republican does run. I'm not sure if it's going to be Rand or who else, but would you say avoid appeasing the beast, sort of?
Well, I would say stick to your principles. Don't compromise for the sake of getting a few more votes. Let's take Bernie Sanders for a moment. By the way, Bernie Sanders and I went to high school together.
I wanted to ask about that.
We were sort of friends, and we overlapped in college for 1 year. So I have sort of a warm spot in my heart for him. But why is he getting the hearts and minds of the people? Because he's sticking to his principles. Now, his principles are Marxism, and his principles are horrible, but he's pretty good on foreign policy. And by the way, if it came to a support between him and Hillary, I'm a
That was a
Bernie
question I
man.
was going to ask you, by the way.
I feel the burn. Bernie is pretty good, not excellent, he's no Ron Paul. He doesn't want to bring all the troops home. Fine, but he's pretty good compared to the Hillary warmonger neocon. She's horrible. I mean, when Gaddafi died, she was exulting, and Madeleine Albright said, well, she was asked, well, suppose what was it, 500,000 Iraqi kids are killed. Is it worth it? And she said yes. I mean, these people are moral monsters. So. One of the criticisms made of Libertarians for Trump was, well, why not Libertarians for Bernie? And I tell you, I'm going to talk to my colleagues, Donald Miller and Ralph Rako, and say maybe we should convert our movement from Libertarians for Trump to Libertarians for Trump and Bernie, or something like that, or have a separate group, Libertarians for Bernie.
Now, I'm curious, if Trump was the Republican nominee and Bernie was the Democrats nominee, which it doesn't look like Bernie's going to do it, I think he's a little too behind delegate-wise, who would you vote for in this situation? Also, Gary Johnson will probably be the Libertarian Party nominee. So, Gary, Bernie, or Donnie?
Well, let me just answer the first question. I don't want to get into the second question because, by the way, Libertarians for Trump is disbanding as soon as the Republicans pick a nominee.
Okay, so
Donald
you guys want to kind of walk from the
if Donald gets it, we disband, and if Donald doesn't get it, we disband, because our only purpose is to get Donald the Republican nomination. So if it was a choice between Donald and Bernie, I would pick Donald, because Bernie is utterly crazy on economics, and they're both roughly equal on foreign policy, and Donald isn't as rabid. I mean, Donald is no free enterpriser, but Bernie is, a Marxist. I mean, he's just horrendous.
I mean, when it comes to Bernie Sanders' ideology, I always look at it like he cannot. I never heard him actually compliment entrepreneurs. I've never heard him compliment people in business. He doesn't seem to like anybody who does anything in the free market.
I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, he talks about the millionaires and the billionaires and the 1%, but he never makes the distinction that all libertarians make, namely between laissez-faire capitalists who earn their money honestly by producing a better product at a lower price on the one hand, and on the other hand, the crony corporate monopoly capitalists who earn their money by bailouts and permissions and subsidies and this and that, and what the public choice people call rent-seeking. Him and Pope Francis, they don't make that distinction. Look, suppose I invent the new widget, and the widget saves lives, and I make $1 billion off of it. I'm a hero. I'm a good guy. Whereas if I get the billion by dipping my hand in your pocket and your pocket, I'm not a good guy. And yet I have the same billion, and they don't make that distinction.
I'm actually, just a fun interruption, I'm actually an inventor. I have 2 patents. By the way, just a quick question. Intellectual property, where do you stand on that issue? Because Stefan Kinsella has had some choice words for me on that.
Well, I'm a Kinsellian on that. I'm a good friend of Stefan. I disagree with him on some things, but I think he's 99.9% pure libertarian, and he's excellent on intellectual property. If you want to get into intellectual property, I can give you the Kinsellian view, and I hold up to it 100%.
Oh, I don't know if we want to go off that much off topic, but thank you. I just want a quick little. I think I had your
question about. It actually pertains to what we were just discussing about Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. You said earlier, Mr. Block, that foreign policy is arguably more important than economics, partly because it determines economic and social policy in the domestic realm. And I'm certainly aware that war is the health of the state, which is a saying of which we libertarians are fond. But I do question whether war is the only health of the state. I feel like even a president who is relatively good on foreign policy in terms of keeping the country out of needless wars might still be very interventionist on the domestic front in both the social and economic spheres, potentially. So how can we be confident that even a president who is relatively non-interventionist on foreign policy, as you say Donald Trump will be, or is likely to be, will nonetheless respect Americans' liberties in the domestic sphere?
Well, we can't be sure of that. And again, I get back to Overseer Goody and Overseer Patty. They're both bad. One is less bad. The one who beats the crap out of us once a month is less bad than the one who beats the crap out of us every hour. He'll kill us. We have no guarantee, and if anything, we have a guarantee, the very opposite, that both Bernie and Donald will be horrible on economics. I mean, Bernie is horrible on economics. We don't have to discuss that. I mean, that's sort of obvious.
I mean, that's just fact. I mean, I enjoy how the CBO did us. The CBO, which, you know, that's not the right-wing Tea Party economics group. It's the CBO. They said what would be the economic impact of Bernie's tax plan. 10% loss to GDP and probably about 8 million jobs to go with it. So, yeah, I think that says it all.
No, Bernie is horrible on economics, but that's not debatable. But it's less true, or less obviously true, that Donald, too, is horrible on economics. I mean, he favors all these welfare and socialized medicine and this and that and protectionism. He's horrible on economics. So if it came to Bernie versus Donald, I would pick Donald, because even they're both bad on economics, and they're both pretty good on foreign policy, but Bernie is way worse than Donald, and not only in economics, but personal liberties, like this idea where the baker has to pay, what was it, $130,000 because he refused to bake a cake for the gay couple? I mean, Bernie would support that sort of a thing, whereas Donald, Donald is great on political correctness, and he would certainly not support that. So if it came to a choice between those two, I would, pick the Donald. But I have to tell you my joke. And the joke is, do you know the difference between a bathroom and a living room? And if you say no, I say, don't come to my house. And now I say, the second part of the joke is, do you know the difference between earning money honestly and getting it crookedly? And if you don't know that, I say, don't get in the political economy. Because there's nothing wrong with what Bill Gates did, or IBM did, or any of these people who earn money, the Apple guy or the Facebook guy, Zuckerberg, whatever. There's a whole bunch of Henry Ford was a good guy, and the Walmart people, they're good guys. Not 100%. They favor the minimum wage, but what the heck? 99%. They're pretty good.
Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect, except the three of us. But
sorry to cut you off, but if you think that, I mean, personally, I've never been a fan of slavery analogies, to be honest. And I'm not going to lie, it's partly, I say that partly as a descendant of actual slaves. But to run with your analogy for the sake of the conversation, if you really think that both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump would just be two different overseers, as you put it, why support either one of them? I mean, it doesn't actually come down to a choice exclusively between those two. You could theoretically cast your vote for, say, Gary Johnson, whom Charles mentioned earlier. I mean, what do you think of the whole idea from the individual voter's perspective of saying, a pox on both the major parties' houses, I'm going with a third-party candidate like Gary Johnson?
Well, you notice I was very cautious. I didn't answer Charles's question. I kept avoiding it.
I was going to catch you on that later. Also, just to know, I'm a little biased. I actually, last weekend, moderated the Philadelphia Libertarian Party debate with Gary. So I've known Gary for 5 years, but please go on.
I also am have my forefathers or foremothers were slaves. I'm Jewish. We were slaves in Pharaoh in Egypt, so I certainly empathize. I think I'm a big fan of Gary Johnson. I admire him greatly. I think he did very good. He got more votes for the Libertarian Party than ever before, and I think not only more votes absolutely, but more relatively. He's very personable. He articulates libertarianism beautifully. Not 100%, but what the heck, very, very good. So when it comes, if it's a choice between Donald and either Bernie or Hillary, I go with Donald. If it's a choice between Donald and Bernie, I go with Donald, because Donald is, they're equal on foreign policy, roughly equal on foreign policy. Donald is way better on economics than Bernie, and way better on personal liberties than Bernie. But if it came to a question of Donald versus Bernie versus Gary Johnson, I See, as a member of Libertarians for Trump, I have to say I want Trump to get the Republican nomination, and it's sort of
Now,
hard. It's
I'd
hard
also
for me.
just I'd also
Go ahead.
just interrupt briefly. You are from Louisiana. I mean, you grew up in Brooklyn, obviously, with your good friend Bernie. But you are a registered voter out of Louisiana, I would assume, correct?
No, I'm too lazy to vote. I never vote, but
Oh,
I'm up for a theoretical.
I was going to say theoretically, if you were to go out and vote in Louisiana, it would pretty much, assuming Trump really, really didn't drop the ball, your vote would essentially not matter that much because Louisiana is. I mean, if Bobby Jindal can win with 70% of the vote, come on, anybody, like any Republican can.
Well, now we're getting not into principles, but we're getting into, I don't know, strategy, and I'd probably
Yeah.
vote for Gary Johnson, because if Gary Johnson could get more votes than the difference between Bernie and Donald, this would put libertarianism on the map, and I think it's very important that libertarianism be put on the map. And I'm a big, big fan of the Libertarian Party. Some people aren't. I am. I ran for office in Brooklyn in 1969 for state assembly, and this is before the national LP started in 71 or 72
With David Nolan, yeah.
with Nolan and what's his name, John Hospers, and in 72, John Hospers. I'm a big, big fan of the Libertarian Party. I've given lectures, discussions at many, many LP state conventions, at the national convention, many a time. If I'm in New Orleans and I know New Orleans is going for Trump in a big way, I would vote for Gary Johnson. On the other hand, if it was Hillary versus Donald Trump, and I think Hillary is going to get us into World War III, and if I were the tie vote, I wouldn't vote for Gary Johnson. I would vote for Trump, even though my heart is with Gary Johnson. But I really don't want World War III. I hate to tell you that. And I want libertarianism to be put on the map, which means Gary Johnson. But if I had any power, or if I had 10,000 votes or something like that, I would try to make sure Trump won, but I only have one vote, and it's not going to matter much, so I'd probably go for Gary Johnson. But I want to remain true to LFT, Libertarians for Trump, and to say that we want Donald Trump to be a Republican candidate for president, and that is the sole purpose of Libertarians for Trump. We're not taking any position on the November election.
So you're trying to avoid November right now. But one thing is, now you've said, obviously you've given your thoughts on the primary with Trump versus Cruz. Which, by the way, just a quick segue. Cruz on economics, 10% flat tax, wants to eliminate a bunch of departments. Do you think on economics he's better than Trump?
Yeah. Okay. Cruz is better than Trump on economics.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, with you've given your thoughts on the Democrats and Republican primary. John Stossel on Friday is going to release a Libertarian Party debate. John McAfee versus Austin Peterson versus Gary Johnson. Do you have any thoughts on that primary and what's going on there?
Well, I don't know these other guys too well, and I've been focusing my efforts, apart from my scholarship, I want to get to that 500, on the Republican, not so much the Libertarian. But I'm a big fan of Gary Johnson, and unless somebody rises head and shoulders over Gary Johnson, which I doubt, I would support Gary Johnson. He did a good job in 2012.
And a recent poll put him a Monmouth, which this is not your schmo libertarian poll. This is an accredited thing. The National Debate Commission recognizes it. They put him at 11%. Which,
yes, 11%. Again, I mean, if he got 11%, that would probably be more than the difference between the two major parties.
Let's hoping he keeps that up.
Yeah, now probably he's not going to keep that up, but if he gets 3%, that'll be triple what any other libertarian ever got. And 3% might be close to the difference between the two, and that would be magnificent.
And it would be it would be triple with what Ralph Nader got.
Yeah. Well, look, the Libertarian Party is the third major party, or the third biggest party, bigger than the Greens, bigger than the Marxist, Commie, Leninist, whatever party. Again, I'm a fan of the Libertarian Party. I'm a member. I think I'm a member of the Libertarian Party. I donate to the Libertarian Party. I donated to Gary Johnson last time when he was running. I'm a big supporter of his. It's just that I want Donald Trump to be the Republican on the basis of reducing the chance of World War III, and also a matter of justice. I mean, the powers that be in the Republican Party, mainly neocon, are frothing at the mouth at the prospect of this man becoming their standard bearer. And I think it's unfair that they're using all sorts of trickery, like they did against Ron Paul, and even Trump said something. I'm not going to let them Ron Paul me, namely use nefarious tactics to undermine what he deserved or earned as a product of the election.
Mr. Black, when it comes to Donald Trump and foreign policy and the likelihood or unlikelihood that he would start World War III, as you put it, I seem to remember him, defending waterboarding and, correct me if I'm wrong, either of you, but I feel like I remember him also musing about the possibility of using tactical nuclear weapons in the fight against ISIS and taking just a generally very hard line in terms of the strategy to defeat ISIS. So, I mean, in light of, again, assuming that I'm not, mischaracterizing his position here, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is it really so clear that Donald Trump wouldn't be likely to start, or that he would be less likely to start World War III? Because I get the impression that a lot of presidential candidates, when they're campaigning, they start out, making very dovish sounding noises, like you mentioned earlier, George W. Bush did when he first ran in 2000. But then once they're in office, they often govern in a way that's more hawkish. So don't you think that might be a risk with Donald as well?
Absolutely. I think you're making a very good point. It certainly would be a risk. But what do we have to go by? All we have to go by is what they say. And, at least he says, let's get out of NATO. At least he says, let's get our troops out of Korea and Japan and Germany. And we have 1,000 military bases in like 150 countries. Nobody else is saying anything like that. Now, you're quite right about the nuclear power, but what he said is, he didn't say he would use it. He said he would not take anything off the table. But even my man Barack Obama said that. They're all saying.
By the way, I will point out the humor in a man who has a lecture online saying why we should privatize the roads, saying my man Barack Obama.
He's my man. He's my man. He hasn't dropped any nuclear bombs. It's true he's killed a lot of innocent people, but what the heck? I mean, they're politicians. What do you expect? And even he said he wouldn't take anything off the table. You see, Akil is right that if you look just at Donald Trump in isolation, he doesn't look that good. I'll be the first to admit it. But if you compare him, Cruz would say the same thing. Kasich would say the same thing. All these other guys, even Barack Obama would say he's not taking anything off the table. So you can't really indict him for that because it's got to be a comparative thing. So my problem.
Take nuclear weapons off the table, though?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Have Ted Cruz and John Kasich said that they would not take nuclear weapons off the table? I can easily see Ted Cruz saying that, but did John Kasich say he would use nuclear weapons in the fight against ISIS as well? I'm not sure.
They all say that, and what I'm saying is even Barack Obama said that. They all say it. So you can't indict. See, you're looking at Donald Trump in isolation. You say, well, he's not good on this, he's not good on that, and I sort of agree with
not just that. The reason I asked about Cruz and Kasich is because I'm trying to look at them comparatively, because Trump, I'm pretty sure, has said, he wouldn't take nuclear weapons off the table, whereas I wasn't aware that either Cruz or Kasich had said that or anything to that effect. So I am trying to look at it comparatively. I'm not sure that Trump really is less bad than Cruz or Kasich, even comparatively speaking.
Well, I don't remember Kasich saying that. He hasn't said much. I haven't studied him as much as Cruz, and Cruz.
At this point, his chance at winning the Republican nomination is my chance of getting a date with Kate Upton. So.
Didn't he say something about, what was it, turning sand green or something like that?
I think sand into glass.
Make the sand glow.
Right, glow or green or whatever. Well, that's a code word for using nuclear weapons. So it's not only that he's not taking off the table, it's that he's welcoming it. I mean, this guy is a madman. He's sort of like John McCain, a crazy man.
He's also essentially a Democrat on economics.
Well, yeah, yeah. The whole Republican Party is, I mean, take the minimum wage law. The Republicans want to keep it as is or raise it a little bit, and the Democrats want to raise it to 15, and maybe next year it'll be to 20 or 25. So they're all very bad on economics. It's just that you have to grant that the Republicans are a little bit better on economics, and you have to grant that the Democrats are a little bit better on personal liberties. Talk about legalizing drugs. You don't get the right wing doing that. You get the left wing doing that.
Well, I mean, with the right wing and the left wing for marijuana legalization, it's almost the same. It looks like everybody under the age of 40 in both parties, they have over 70, 80% support. And so that looks a little better. But one final question I really wanted to touch on before we get off, because I know you have a meeting at 5. Uh, when it comes to this whole race right here, clearly the winner, whether it be Trump, Clinton, Cruz, Bernie, they're not going to be beneficial to America for the most part. They might help in a couple ways. Going 4 years into the future, who would you like? I know you have a bit of a tendency to support the big parties, and I agree with you on that. Who would you like to see run for the Republican nomination in 2020?
Ron Paul.
Oh,
Now I know what is he going to be, 90 by then? But
he'll be 86.
86, but he'll be a young 86. I mean, this guy rides a bicycle in the heat of Texas in the summer. He is an athlete. He is magnificent. I can think of nobody better than him. However, if you push me and you say it got to be somebody under 80, Andrew Napolitano.
Okay, that's actually
Andrew
an
Napolitano
interesting.
is articulate. His middle name is Articulation, I think. I'm not sure that his parents named him that, but he's very articulate.
Well, his last name's Italian, so I can always appreciate that.
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't get me the way it gets you, but what the heck? He is a solid libertarian. He's a judge, or he's been a judge. His name is well known. He's relatively young. He's not anywhere near 80 or anything like that, so he would be good.
60s or so, though?
He's around 60.
65 is young for politics.
Look, I'm 74, so
Yeah,
a guy
he was
65.
in his 40s when he was inaugurated, don't we?
Well, look, there are other good people. I mean, go to the Mises Institute. The Mises Institute is having a Austrian Economic Research Center this weekend. I'm going to it. And there you will find, I don't know, 200 or 300 scholars. And I pick any one of them to run in 2020. And a lot of them are just kids. Some of my college students from Loyola are going to be attending. Any young libertarian would be good.
It's interesting you bring that up because I've felt for a long time that it's too bad more actual policy scholars like yourself don't go into politics since they know so much more than the politicians. But what do you think of people like Thomas Massie or Justin Amash? They're two libertarians, or at least libertarian-leaning legislators in the House of Representatives. Would you like them run, maybe?
Yeah, they're very good. Massie and Nash are very good. They're about as good as Rand Paul, and about as good as Gary Johnson. What I did is I once had a libertarian meter, and I put all those guys at around 70, 75, and Ron Paul at 99, and Murray Rothbard at 110 or something.
Where'd you fall?
I'm sorry?
Where did you fall on that?
100.
So Murray Rothbard got 10 above you.
Well, Murray Rothbard is the man. I mean, he's Mr. Libertarian, and I don't agree with Murray on everything, and where I disagree with Murray, I think I'm right on voluntary slavery and on immigration and a few minor details. But Murray is my man. I mean, Murray is my mentor. Murray is my friend. I love Murray. Murray is Mr. Libertarian. I would say that Massie and Amash are excellent, and Gary Johnson. You know, Gary Johnson was the governor of New Mexico. For all I know, in 2020, he could be running for the Republican.
I'm encouraging him to do so.
I think that would be good.
He ran for the GOP nomination last time, right? In 2011.
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Gary Johnson initially ran for the Republican presidential nomination in 2011, 2012.
I think that Ron Paul kind of took any support he would have had.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if Gary Johnson runs in 2020 for the Republican nomination, I would certainly support him. I mean, he's really good. I would put all those guys at 70, 75, 80% Libertarian, which is excellent.
And with Rand Paul, I mean, I don't think based on the performance of 2016, I think we have a right to vet other people.
Yeah, well, the three people that we're now mentioning, Massey and
Amash.
and Gary Johnson, are all either a former governor or present congressman, so they have some sort of standing. They wouldn't just be booted off the stage or something like that. Although nowadays, you know, we had these three candidates, Trump and the black doctor, what was his name?
Ben Carson.
Ben Carson, and that woman, the three
Carly
people.
Fiorina.
Of Carly Fiorina, three people who have no standing as politicians whatsoever, and yet did reasonably well. So all bets are off on that.
Okay, so just closing this up, I want to thank you for coming on. Uh, Look forward to seeing you at some Mises event. I think you do show up to the summer event, so I might run into you there. Anyway, have a nice day, and we are going to go off in 1, 2, 3.